This is Off the Cuff, and I'm Steve from TorahFamily.org. There's a misconception among believers today that has many believing Yahweh can't use them because of this reason or that. But the phrase, God can't use me, is just a lie from the enemy. The enemy's goal is for you to never become a threat to him. What better way to defeat you than to keep you off the battlefield from the start? He'll do all he can to defeat you before you become the threat that he knows you can be. But that's just it. More times than not, the enemy can see what kind of threat you can become more than you can. So, he does all he can to capitalize on that. Please let that sink in. He will set on your shoulders and browbeat you over and over again until you feel like dirt. You just need to remember that Yahweh uses dirt. Yeshua spit in the dirt to heal a blind man. So, it doesn't matter if you're dirt or not. He can use you. The enemy knows that, but he doesn't want you to know that. It's time to wake up, get up, and start walking in obedience. Victory is a choice, and it only comes when we walk in obedience to Yahweh. He has so much in store for us. Remember, the enemy comes only to steal and kill and destroy. But Yeshua came to give us life, abundant life, life to the full. Are you walking in abundant life? Now, I'm not talking about having things, which is what the world focuses on as far as being abundant, meaning abundant life. I'm talking about having His joy flowing in your life and through your life to others. It's all about touching lives for Him. When we focus our life on self, depression is just around the corner. You will never be fulfilled. You will always be looking for that something in your life to make you happy and fulfilled. But it only comes when we serve Him in serving others. Being there for others, encouraging others, being the part of the body that we're called to be. Now, can you find happiness in other things? Well, of course, but it's temporary. It'll always leave you wanting more. Only in Yahweh can we find that peace that passes all understanding. Only in Yahweh can we find that fulfillment that we all look for. I once heard it said, when Yahweh created fish, He spoke to the waters. When Yahweh created trees, He spoke to the dirt. When Yahweh created man, He spoke to Himself. Remove a fish from water, and it dies. Remove a tree from dirt, and it dies. Remove us from Yahweh, we die. Water without fish is still water. Dirt without trees is still dirt. Yahweh without us is still Yahweh. We need Yahweh. Nothing, and I mean nothing, can replace Him. Only in Him do we find life and fulfillment, peace and joy. Only in Him. The enemy will do all he can to get you away from Yahweh because he doesn't want Yahweh to use you against him. I've heard people say, well, I'm not good enough and I'll never be good enough. You're right. You're absolutely right. You will never be good enough. But that's not why Yahweh uses or doesn't use people. Because no one is good enough. No one. Romans 3:23, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. So all have sinned, yet we know he used many people. But if all have sinned and yet he still used them, what's that tell us? It tells us he uses imperfect people. For example, consider this verse in James 5. James 5:17. Elijah was a man just like us. Now, stop there. Look at those words. Elijah was a man just like us. I know. You're probably saying, but Steve, Elijah was a righteous man. Yep, you're right. He was. In fact, that's the topic at hand closing out the previous verse. But that's the encouragement. Elijah was a man just like us, imperfect. But he grew in righteousness, telling us what? We can grow in the righteousness of Yahweh just like Elijah did. One day at a time, we learn and we grow. Some might say, oh, but Steve, you don't know what I've done. I don't need to know what you've done. Have you considered what others have done and yet Yahweh still used them? He used David even after he lusted, committed adultery and murder. Moses killed a man, and yet look at what Yahweh did through Moses. Oh, but Steve, no, it's not oh, but Steve. He used a donkey. So if he used a donkey, he can use us. He can use us. Every time I read this, I don't know what intrigues me more, the fact that the donkey spoke or that Balaam answered it. But the point is, he used the donkey. Don't think he's not using you just because you don't have a ministry. Everyone has a ministry. Everyone. The people he's placed in your life is your ministry. Never underestimate what a small thing can do for someone. In fact, being faithful in the small things is what shows we can be trusted with more later on down the road. Let him use you. Let Yahweh use you. Get rid of the oh, woe is me mentality that the enemy is oppressing you with, and rise up as more than a conqueror in Yahweh. You know, Gideon had that exact same mindset. I'm talking the oh, woe is me mindset. Judges 6:11. The angel of Yahweh came and sat down under the oak in Ophrah that belonged to Joash, the Abiezrite, where his son Gideon was threshing wheat in a winepress to keep it from the Midianites. When the angel of Yahweh appeared to Gideon, he said, Yahweh is with you, mighty warrior. Now, he said, mighty warrior. Remember that. Next verse. But Sir, Gideon replied, if Yahweh is with us, why has all this happened to us? Where is all his wonders that our fathers told us about when they said, did not Yahweh bring us up out of Egypt? But now Yahweh has abandoned us and put us into the hand of Midian. Yahweh turned to him and said, go in the strength you have and save Israel out of Midian's hand. Am I not sending you? But Lord, Gideon asked, how can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my family. Now look at the oh, woe is me mentality. In Gideon's eyes, he was the weakest of the weak, the lowest of the low. Why? Because he was looking at himself. But Yahweh didn't see what Gideon saw. Yahweh called him a mighty warrior. How many times does Yahweh see a mighty warrior in people, but they're too busy listening to the lies of the enemy? Look what Yahweh said next. Verse 16. Yahweh answered, I will be with you, and you will strike down all the Midianites together. He said, I will be with you. Folks, Romans 8:31. If God is for us, who can be against us? Stop looking at your inabilities and insecurities. That's nothing but a tactic of the enemy. I'm serious. Stop looking at others. Look at Him. Focus your life on Him. When Peter took his eyes off of Yeshua, he started sinking. But let it be known, Peter's the only one who walked on water besides Yeshua. But he had to keep his eyes on Yeshua. The same is true for us. Keep your eyes on Him, and He will do awesome things through you. But when we don't, we lose. We have to keep our eyes on Him, and then we'll see the mighty things that He has for us. Don't worry about what others are doing. You do what He's called you to do. It's not about being like someone else. It's not about doing what others do. Stop comparing yourself to others. That only brings us down. Stop looking at who you aren't and start looking at who He is. It's all about doing what He wants you to do. Being who He wants you to be. And that can only be done when we focus our life on Him. I recently saw a meme that said, "Not everyone will understand your calling." That's okay. It wasn't a conference call. Remember, Yahweh doesn't call the equipped. He equips the called. And that happens one day at a time. One day at a time, meaning it takes patience for us to learn, to grow, to become more like Him. As I've said before, we all have different pulpits. So get to it. Let Him use you where you are at. If you want Him to use you tomorrow, let Him use you today. Be faithful in the small things, the things that no one sees. And remember, Yahweh likes to use the nobodies of the world. 1 Corinthians 1:27, but God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. You know, the disciples weren't trained teachers. They were mostly fishermen. But that just goes to show us all the more. He can use anyone. It's not you. It's Him. So let Him use you. People who shine from within don't need a spotlight. So don't seek the glory. Seek Him and give Him the glory. The greatest servant of Yahweh is just that, a servant. He can use you. Let Him use you. No matter how insignificant you feel, He can use you. No matter how unworthy you feel, He can use you. No matter what others may say about you, to you, around you, it doesn't matter. He can use you. Let Him use you. Let the chains of the enemy fall from you and start walking in His freedom and calling today. Today. Well, that's all I have. Think about it. Pray about it. But more than anything, be a doer of the word and not a hearer only. Until next time, Shalom.